"Never go to the farm, Catherine. Promise me." Those words, spoken with a fear I'd never heard in his voice, were one of the only demands my husband Joshua ever made in 24 years of marriage. I kept that promise. Even when curiosity ate at me during those rare moments he mentioned his Canadian childhood. Even when I caught him staring out the window, lost somewhere I couldn't follow. But then Joshua died. A heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. Just a phone call that shattered my entire existence. 2 weeks after the funeral, his attorney handed me an antique brass key and a letter in Joshua's handwriting. Inside, the address to a property I never knew existed. A 2,200-acre farm in Alberta, Canada, the very place he'd forbidden me to visit. And that's when his 3 brothers showed up. Men I'd never met. Men Joshua never spoke about. Demanding I hand over a farm that's suddenly worth tens of millions in oil. What I found inside that farmhouse changed everything. A laptop with 365 video messages, one for every day of my first year without him. And the first video revealed a secret so massive, it proved Joshua knew exactly what his brothers would try to pull from beyond the grave. I arrived at Maple Creek Farm 48 hours after learning it existed. The gates were massive, wrought iron with the property name arched across the top. Beyond them stretched rolling hills dotted with maple trees turning gold in the autumn light. A stunning 2-story farmhouse sat in the distance, freshly painted, surrounded by outbuildings that looked brand new. This wasn't some broken-down family homestead. This was an estate, meticulously restored. Beautiful. Loved. My hands shook as I inserted the brass key into the front door. The lock clicked open. I stepped inside and literally gasped. The entryway opened into this soaring great room with exposed wooden beams and a massive stone fireplace. But it wasn't the architecture that stole my breath. It was the horses. Not real ones. Paintings, sculptures, photographs. Everywhere I looked, exquisite artwork of horses galloping across endless fields. My lifelong passion. The one thing Joshua always supported but never quite understood. He had built me a gallery, and there on a desk by the window, overlooking the pastures, sat a silver laptop. A single red rose laid across its closed lid. That's when I heard tires crunching on gravel outside. I moved to the window and felt my stomach drop. A black SUV had pulled up behind my rental car. 3 men emerged, all tall, dark-haired, with the same strong jawline Joshua had. The Mitchell brothers had arrived, and from their expressions, they hadn't come to welcome the widow to Canada. I locked the front door and backed away, heart pounding. The knocking started. Hard. Insistent. "Mrs. Mitchell, we know you're in there. We should talk." I stayed silent, watching through the side window as the oldest brother, a silver-haired version of Joshua with much harder eyes, pressed his face against the glass. Robert Mitchell. I'd learn his name soon enough. Behind him stood 2 younger men, Alan and David, all carrying the confident posture of people who believed they belonged here. "Your husband's brothers have contested the will," my attorney had warned me back in Minnesota. They claimed Joshua wasn't mentally competent when he repurchased the family property. Ridiculous. Joshua was the most rational person I'd ever known. But now, watching them pace my porch with growing frustration, I understood. This wasn't about Joshua's mental state. This was about what lay beneath the soil. Significant oil deposits had been discovered in this region 18 months ago. Suddenly, the worthless family farm they'd mocked Joshua for buying was worth tens of millions. I ignored their knocking and went straight to the laptop. The password was the date we met, followed by my maiden name. Joshua had thought of everything. The screen lit up, opening to a folder labeled simply, "For Catherine." Inside were hundreds of video files, each named with a date. Starting from the day after his funeral and extending a full year into the future. 365 videos. 1 year of messages from beyond the grave. With trembling fingers, I clicked the first one, and there he was. My Joshua, not the thin, pale version from his final months, but healthy, vibrant, his crooked grin making my heart skip just like it always had. "Hello, Cat." His voice, his actual voice. A sob escaped my throat. "If you're watching this, then I'm gone and you've come to the farm despite my years of making you promise not to. I should have known you wouldn't be able to resist." He chuckled softly. That laugh I'd give anything to hear in person again. "I've made a video for every day of your first year without me. 1 year of keeping you company while you grieve. 1 year of explaining everything I should have told you while I was alive." He looked down briefly, then back at the camera with that determined expression I knew so well. "Starting with why I bought back the farm I swore I'd never set foot on again." And then he dropped the first bombshell. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a heart condition I inherited from my father. The doctors gave me 2 to 5 years. The room spun. He'd known. For 3 years he'd known he was dying, and never told me, never told our daughter Jenna. "I know you're angry right now," he continued, as if reading my thoughts from the grave. "You have every right to be. But I made this choice out of love, not deception. I didn't want pity. I didn't want our final years overshadowed by death. I wanted to live fully with you until the end, not slowly die in front of you." I was furious, heartbroken, devastated. But somewhere beneath all of it, I understood. When I got my diagnosis, I decided to use whatever time I had left to create something meaningful for you. You always loved horses, always talked about having land someday where you could raise them. So I found the last place anyone would expect me to go, the farm I'd fled at 18, vowing never to return. Outside, the brothers had returned to their SUV and were now on their phones, gesturing angrily toward the house. Through the window, I could see Robert holding up what looked like legal documents. Joshua's face hardened on screen. "My brothers will come for it. They never wanted the farm until oil was discovered. Suddenly, the property they'd mocked me for buying was valuable. They'll try everything to take it from you." He leaned closer to the camera. "In the bottom drawer of this desk is a blue folder with every legal document you need. The farm is unquestionably yours. I made sure of it. But Kat, whether you keep it or sell it is entirely your choice. I built this place for you, but I don't want it to become a burden." The video ended, freezing on his smiling face. I sat there, tears streaming down my cheeks, when a police cruiser came up the driveway. Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The brothers had called law enforcement on me. "Mrs. Mitchell, RCMP, we need you to open the door, please." But here's the thing the brothers didn't know, and it changes everything about this story. What exactly was in that blue folder? And how had Joshua managed to buy a property his brothers believed they had rights to? That's what I discovered next. I opened the door with the blue folder clutched in my hands. A young constable stood on the porch, flanked by 3 Mitchell men whose expressions ranged from smug to openly hostile. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Constable Wilson. These gentlemen have a court order requesting an inspection of the property as part of an ongoing estate dispute." I smiled calmly, channeling strength I didn't know I had. "Of course, Constable. But first, I think you should see these." I handed over the blue folder. Inside was everything Joshua had prepared: a clear deed transfer, properly notarized statements, certified bank records of the original purchase. Robert stepped forward with a dismissive wave. "Family property disputes are complicated, Constable. My sister-in-law is understandably emotional and confused." "Actually," I interrupted, "I'm neither emotional nor confused. I'm a widow standing on property that legally belongs to me, facing 3 strangers who happen to share my late husband's DNA." The constable examined the documents, his expression shifting from neutral to impressed. "These appear to be in order, Mrs. Mitchell. A clear deed transfer, certified purchase records, properly notarized statements." He turned to the brothers. Gentlemen, I don't see grounds for forcing an inspection today. This is a matter for civil courts. Robert's face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. That woman has no right. That woman, I said calmly, is Joshua Mitchell's wife, and I have every right to be here. The brothers retreated to their vehicle, followed by the apologetic constable. But the expressions on their faces as they drove away made one thing abundantly clear. This was just the opening skirmish. The war for Maple Creek Farm had only begun. I closed the door and called Ellis, the stable manager Joshua had hired. He arrived within minutes, a weathered man in his early 60s with kind eyes and a protective demeanor. "Your husband spoke of you often," Ellis said as we walked the property. "Every month for the past 3 years, he was here overseeing everything personally, never delegated a decision if he could make it himself." He led me to the stables, and I stopped breathing. 6 horses. Magnificent breeds. An Andalusian, a Frisian, 2 quarter horses, a thoroughbred, a gentle Appaloosa that nickered softly when I approached. The black Frisian, Ellis pointed to a stunning stallion watching us with intelligent eyes. "That's Midnight. Your husband spent months tracking him down. Said he reminded him of a horse in a painting you loved." My heart clenched. The Stubbs painting, a black horse against a stormy sky. I'd admired it at a museum 20 years ago, and Joshua had remembered. "Did my husband ever mention his health to you?" I asked. A shadow crossed Ellis's face. "Not directly, but these last 6 months he pushed harder, worked longer hours, added more features to the property, like a man racing against a clock only he could see." The confirmation stung, but also explained so much. The driven quality I'd sensed in Joshua during his final months. I'd attributed it to work stress, never imagined he was creating all this while knowing his time was limited. "His brothers were here yesterday," I said. "What can you tell me about them?" Ellis's expression hardened. "Robert runs an investment firm in Toronto. Alan's a lawyer, slick talker. David followed Robert into finance, always in his shadow. From what I gathered, they tormented your husband as a child, mocked him for staying to help your father-in-law run this place." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "When Joshua returned to buy the property, they ridiculed him for wasting money on worthless land, right up until the Petersons struck oil 2 properties over. Then suddenly they were very interested in the family farm they hadn't visited in decades." "They'll be back," I said. "Count on it," Ellis nodded. But Mr. Mitchell prepared for that. He was always 3 steps ahead. Back at the house, I discovered exactly how far ahead Joshua had been thinking. In the east wing, behind a locked door with a key hidden in our bedroom, I found a fully equipped art studio. Professional easels, canvases, paints, brushes, floor-to-ceiling windows flooding the space with perfect northern light. I hadn't painted in 20 years. After college, I'd set aside my artistic dreams to teach, to help support us while Joshua built his career, to raise our daughter. Over the years, someday had become a bittersweet memory of a path not taken. In a cabinet below the window seat, I found my old paintings, all of them. Work I'd created in college, pieces I thought had been lost in our moves over the decades. Joshua had preserved every single one. On top lay a small canvas, my final project before graduation, a self-portrait of a young woman looking forward, eyes alight with possibilities. Tucked beside it was a handwritten note. "She's still in there, Kat. The woman who painted with such passion and vision. I've given you the space. The rest is up to you." I clutched the note to my chest, overwhelmed. My husband had seen me in ways I hadn't allowed myself to be seen in years. Now you might be wondering, what about Jenna? Our daughter was back in Minnesota, grieving her father. Surely she'd be my ally in this fight. That's not what happened. The brothers had already gotten to her, and what they told her next nearly destroyed everything. The next morning, 2 vehicles came up the driveway, the brothers' black SUV, and behind it, a silver Mercedes I recognized instantly. Jenna, our 27-year-old daughter, emerged and strode confidently toward her new uncles, smiling, shaking hands, her body language open and receptive. They'd been working on her for less than a day, and already she was calling them family. "Mom," Jenna said as she entered, embracing me briefly before stepping back to admire the great room. "This place is unbelievable. Why didn't Dad ever tell us about it?" Before I could answer, Robert stepped forward, his conciliatory tone not matching the calculation in his eyes. "Catherine, I believe we got off on the wrong foot yesterday." Beside him, Alan clutched a leather portfolio that undoubtedly contained legal documents. David maintained his usual silent observer position. "Jenna," I said, ignoring Robert completely, "we agreed you wouldn't engage with your father's brothers until we'd talked." She flushed. "They called again this morning with a very reasonable proposal. I thought I should hear them out." Her chin lifted defiantly. "Besides, they're my family too. Family you didn't know existed until yesterday. Only because Dad kept them from us, just like he kept this whole place secret. Don't you think that's strange? What else was he hiding?" The question hid uncomfortably close to the revelations in Joshua's videos. But his reasons had been born of love, not deception. "Your father had complicated relationships with his brothers," I said carefully. "He had reasons for maintaining distance." Robert waved dismissively. "Ancient history. Siblings clash, especially in difficult families. What matters now is moving forward together." "Exactly," Jenna agreed, with the earnestness of someone who believed they were being perfectly reasonable. Uncle Robert explained everything. "This farm has been in the Mitchell family for generations. Dad bought it from Grandpa Mitchell, but it was always meant to be shared among the brothers eventually." I suppressed a sigh. They'd been working on her for less than a day, and already she was parroting their version of events. "And the sudden interest wouldn't have anything to do with the oil discovery?" I asked mildly. Alan stepped forward, opening his portfolio. "The mineral rights situation is just one aspect of a complex legal picture. We've prepared a fair settlement offer that honors Joshua's wishes while acknowledging the family's historic claim." "A 1/3 share to you, Catherine," Robert added, placing a grandfatherly hand on Jenna's shoulder. "1/3 to Jenna. 1/3 split among us brothers. Everyone wins." Jenna looked at me expectantly, already sold. "It makes sense, Mom. We don't need this huge place. We could sell it all, walk away with millions, and Dad's family stays intact." "Your father specifically left this property to me," I said quietly. "Not to you, not to his brothers." "Out of confusion and misplaced sentiment," Robert countered smoothly. "Joshua wasn't thinking clearly in his final years." Something flashed hot in my chest. My husband was perfectly sound of mind until the day he died. Then why all the secrecy? David spoke for the first time, his voice softer but no less pointed. Why hide the property purchase from his wife and daughter? Why the elaborate arrangements with the lawyer? These aren't the actions of a man thinking rationally. I thought of the videos, the renovated farm, the art studio, each element meticulously planned as a final gift. Nothing about it suggested confusion. But Jenna was wavering. I could see it. Her father's death had left her adrift, and these men were offering a connection to him through shared blood and history. Powerful bait for a young woman mourning her dad. I asked them to leave. They did, but Jenna went with them. That's when Ellis led me to the weathered barn at the edge of the property. Inside, beneath hay bales and old equipment, he revealed a trap door. "Your husband called it insurance," Ellis said, descending into darkness. "I call it genius." He flipped a switch. Lights illuminated a concrete tunnel stretching 50 yards before opening into a large room filled with filing cabinets, computer equipment, and walls covered with maps and documents. "Welcome to Joshua's war room." I moved to the nearest wall where a detailed survey map showed surrounding properties for miles. Red markings indicated oil deposits, with handwritten notes about depth and quality. I don't understand. Ellis pointed to the western section of the property, the rugged, apparently unusable acres Robert hadn't even mentioned in his proposal. The largest deposit isn't under the eastern section where everyone's drilling, it's here, under the land that looks worthless. The brothers had deliberately excluded it from their generous offer. They thought they were cheating me out of scrubland. They had no idea they were walking away from the real fortune. But that's not all, Ellis continued, withdrawing a thick folder from a cabinet. Joshua documented decades of questionable business practices by all three brothers: tax evasion, insider trading, misappropriation of client funds, enough evidence to ruin them professionally if it ever came to light. I leafed through the meticulous documentation: email printouts, financial records, sworn statements from former employees. Joshua had built an airtight case. He knew they'd come after the farm once he was gone, Ellis said. He wanted you to have leverage. So I had leverage. I had evidence. I had the true geological surveys. But the brothers had already gotten to Jenna. The question was, could I bring her back? That's exactly what the next video from Joshua was designed to do. I met Jenna at a small cafe in the nearest town, 20 miles from the farm. Neutral territory. Away from both the brothers' influence and the emotional weight of Joshua's sanctuary. She arrived 15 minutes late, defensive posture already in place. I can't stay long. Uncle Robert is taking me to meet the family attorney this afternoon. Uncle Robert, I repeated. You've become quite close in 3 days. They've been nothing but kind and welcoming, which is more than I can say for you, treating them like enemies instead of Dad's family. I sipped my coffee, choosing my words carefully. Do you remember that art history course you took sophomore year? The professor who talked about perspective? How where you stand completely changes what you see. What does that have to do with anything? You've only heard their perspective. I'm asking you to consider there might be another view. Your father's. Dad's dead, she said bluntly, pain flashing across her features. And he obviously didn't trust either of us enough to tell us about this place while he was alive. I reached into my bag and withdrew a tablet. Actually, he left something for both of us. Queuing up the specific video Joshua had labeled for Jenna when she needs it, I turned the screen toward her. Her face went pale. Your father made videos, Jenna. Hundreds of them. Messages to guide us after he was gone. I paused, letting this sink in. He knew he was dying for 3 years. He chose not to tell us. Wanted to spare us watching him decline. That's impossible, she whispered, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Watch the video. Hear it from him. With trembling fingers, she pressed play. Joshua's face appeared, healthy, vibrant, his eyes crinkling with that smile so uniquely his. Hello, my brilliant girl. If you're watching this, then I'm gone. And knowing you, you're probably angry about all the secrets I kept. You never did like being kept in the dark about anything, even as a toddler. Tears welled in Jenna's eyes. I should have told you I was sick, should have given you time to prepare, to ask all those questions you're so good at asking. But I was selfish. I wanted our last years together to be normal. I hope someday you'll forgive me. His expression shifted, growing serious. But there's something else you need to know. Something about my brothers that I've never shared. Jenna. They embezzled my portion of our father's estate when I was 19. Used my name on fraudulent documents while I was away at college. When I discovered it and threatened to expose them, they threatened to implicate me as a willing participant. Jenna's hand covered her mouth. I left Canada. Changed my name slightly from Jonathan to Joshua, started over in Minnesota, met your mother, built a life, raised you. It was more than enough. His expression hardened. But my brothers never changed. Whatever they're telling you now, remember this. They've wanted control of the family property for decades. Not out of sentiment. Pure greed. and they'll use anyone, including my daughter, to get it." The video ended, freezing on his concerned face. Jenna sat motionless, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "He was protecting us," she whispered finally. "All this time, from more than just his illness." I nodded gently. "Your uncles aren't the family connection they're pretending to be. They're opportunists who see you as their easiest path to what they want." She wiped her tears, anger replacing grief in her expression. "They've been lying to me. About everything. Not everything. The farm is worth millions. That part is true. But they haven't told you about the western section they conveniently excluded from their proposal. Or the true extent of the oil deposits there." Understanding dawned. "They're trying to cheat us." "Us?" I repeated, hope flickering. "Mom, I never left your side. She looked down, ashamed. "I wanted to feel connected to Dad through his family. They had stories about him as a kid. Photos I'd never seen. Grief makes us vulnerable in ways we can't anticipate," I assured her. "But now we need to be smarter than they are. Together." Jenna straightened, her expression shifting from devastation to determination, so like her father that my heart ached. "What's the plan?" I smiled, feeling the first real sense of confidence since this ordeal began. "First, we're meeting my attorney. Then we have an appointment with Western Plains Energy, their competitor. Because right now, we know something your uncles don't. Exactly where the oil is, and how much there really is." I showed her the geological surveys from the war room. "Dad always said you were the smartest person he'd ever met," Jenna said, a hint of pride in her voice. That underneath that quiet high school teacher was a tactical genius who could outthink anyone if properly motivated. "Did he really say that?" "All the time." She smiled, wiping away the last of her tears. "He also said that the biggest mistake anyone could make was underestimating Catherine Mitchell." And he was right. Because 3 days later, when the Mitchell brothers walked into what they thought would be their victory meeting, they had no idea what was waiting for them. This next part is deeply satisfying, and it's where everything Joshua had planned finally came together. The brothers arrived at 10 a.m. sharp, their black SUV crunching up the gravel with the confidence of men who believed victory was merely a formality. Behind them followed a silver Mercedes carrying Harrison Wells, CEO of Northern Extraction, their oil company ally. I watched from the great room window, dressed in a tailored suit I'd purchased specifically for this confrontation. Appearances matter when staging a coup. "They're here," I called to Jenna, who emerged looking equally professional, her father's watch displayed prominently on her wrist. "Ready?" she asked. "Completely. Remember, let them talk themselves into a corner first." In the formal dining room, I'd prepared a large table set with documents at each place. A hidden screen descended from the ceiling, everything carefully choreographed. Robert entered with the easy entitlement of men accustomed to controlling rooms. "Catherine, we appreciate you agreeing to this meeting. This is Harrison Wells, CEO of Northern Extraction. We thought it might be productive to have an industry expert join our discussion." "How thoughtful," I replied. "Please sit." As they settled in, expressions of confidence firmly in place, I remained standing at the head of the table. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to thank you for your previous proposal. It was educational." Robert's smile widened, clearly interpreting my comment as submission. "Yes, division," I mused, picking up a remote. "That's precisely what I'd like to discuss." I pressed a button. The hidden screen descended. A detailed map of Maple Creek Farm appeared, all 2,200 acres. "This is the complete survey," I said, "not just the eastern 800 acres mentioned in your proposal." Alan shifted uncomfortably. "The western section is undevelopable rocky terrain. We excluded it for simplicity's sake." "How considerate." Another click. The map overlaid with oil deposit locations. Harrison Wells straightened in his chair. professional mask slipping as he leaned forward with sudden, intense interest. The massive deposit beneath the worthless western acres lit up in bright red. "These surveys are unreliable," Robert sputtered. "Northern Extraction's analysis indicates—" "Actually," interrupted a new voice from the doorway, "those surveys have been verified by 3 independent geological teams." The brothers turned in shock as Thomas Reeves, CEO of Western Plains Energy, Northern Extraction's primary competitor, entered the room, followed by my attorney. "What is this?" Robert demanded, half rising from his chair. "This," I said pleasantly, "is a meeting about the true value of Maple Creek Farm. Mr. Reeves has expressed significant interest after reviewing the complete geological data my husband compiled." Harrison Wells shot a betrayed glare at the brothers. "You told me you had exclusive negotiating rights." "They don't," my attorney interjected, placing additional documents on the table. "Mrs. Mitchell holds clear, uncontested title to the entire property, including all mineral rights. The documents you've been shown by the Mitchell brothers have no legal standing whatsoever." Robert slammed his hand on the table. "This property has been in the Mitchell family for generations. Joshua had a moral obligation." "Moral obligations?" Jenna spoke for the first time, her voice steady. "Like the moral obligation you had to my father when you stole his inheritance? When you forged his signature on loan documents? When you threatened to implicate him in your financial crimes if he exposed you?" The room went silent. Color drained from the brothers' faces. "What exactly is she talking about?" Wells asked, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Perhaps these will clarify matters," I said, nodding to my attorney, who distributed sealed envelopes to everyone at the table. "Copies of documentation regarding certain historical transactions involving Mitchell family assets. The statute of limitations may have expired on some matters, but the Canadian financial regulatory authorities might still find others quite interesting." Alan opened his envelope, scanning the contents with increasing alarm. "These are private family matters, completely irrelevant. On the contrary, they establish a pattern of fraudulent behavior that directly impacts your credibility in these negotiations. Behavior that continued when you deliberately misled Mr. Wells about your standing to negotiate for this property." "What do you want?" Robert finally asked, his confident facade crumbling. "I want you to leave Maple Creek Farm and never return. I want you to cease all attempts to contest my ownership or manipulate my daughter. In exchange, these documents remain private." Harrison Wells stood abruptly. "I believe my company's involvement in this matter has been based on incomplete and potentially fraudulent information. If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Mitchell." He shot a disgusted look at the brothers before exiting. 2 hours later, the Mitchell brothers departed, defeated, exposed, and legally bound by the settlement agreement my attorney had prepared in advance. As their vehicles disappeared down the driveway, Ellis appeared at my side. "Your husband would be proud. You outmaneuvered them exactly as he believed you would." I watched the dust settle, a strange mix of emotions washing through me. Triumph tinged with grief, strength emerging from vulnerability. "We're not finished yet," I replied. "This was just the first battle." Spring came to Maple Creek Farm. The horses ran in green pastures. Oil was carefully extracted from the western hills through the sustainable arrangement I'd insisted upon. And in the studio my husband had designed, I was painting again for the first time in 20 years. Today's subject waited patiently in the paddock below my window. Midnight, the magnificent Frisian stallion Joshua had spent months tracking down because he reminded him of a painting I'd admired 2 decades ago. Jenna visited often. We'd established a morning ritual, watching Joshua's daily video together over breakfast, finding comfort and guidance in his posthumous presence. Some days we laughed, some days we cried, but every day we felt him with us. Now you've seen how Joshua's secret planning from beyond the grave protected everything he loved. But what happens when someone doesn't leave behind that kind of preparation? What if you're facing a family inheritance battle with no secret war room, no hidden evidence, and no one to guide you? That's exactly what I cover in my next video. I inherited nothing, then found a letter that changed everything. It's the story of a woman who thought she'd lost her family legacy entirely until she discovered one overlooked document that flipped the entire situation on its head. Trust me, you won't believe what was in that letter. Click the video on your screen right now to watch it next. I'll see you there. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I'd found one final mystery, a sealed letter to Robert that Joshua had labeled, "Only deliver if absolutely necessary." That letter, it turned out, contained the revelation that the Mitchell brothers had two half-siblings they'd never known about, children from their father's secret second family, siblings who shared their rare blood type, which became crucial when Robert was later diagnosed with the same heart condition that had taken Joshua. Even from the grave, my husband was orchestrating healing. On the great room wall now hangs a massive painting, the one Joshua had commissioned a blank canvas for before his diagnosis. It depicts the farm across different eras, the abandoned property he purchased, the painful childhood home, the ancient land beneath it all. And threading through these temporal layers are two riders on horseback, a man and a woman, with a third figure behind them, a young woman forging her own path forward. Joshua had transformed his childhood prison into my sanctuary, his painful past into my promising future. The forbidden farm had become hallowed ground, not because of the oil beneath its soil, but because it represented his final triumph over the family that had rejected him, and the lasting love that had sustained him. He left me 365 videos, 1 year of guidance. But what he really left me was possibility, the chance to become more fully myself without constraint. The forbidden farm is forbidden no longer. It's home.